The enigmatic beauty. In the heart of Oko, a vibrant and prosperous village nestled amidst rolling hills and lush greenery, lived a young woman named Akila. Her beauty was unmatched, her every movement graceful as though she floated on air. Her skin shimmered like bronze kissed by the sun, and her eyes held an unspoken wisdom that seemed to pierce through anyone who dared to meet her gaze. Despite her charm, Akila was an enigma to the villagers. She lived in a modest house on the outskirts of the village, surrounded by a garden of vibrant flowers that seemed to bloom year-round. Every morning, she would appear in the bustling market, her woven basket brimming with fruits, herbs, and vegetables of impeccable quality. The villagers marveled at her produce, whispering that her garden must be blessed by the gods. Akila was kind to everyone, especially to the village children, who followed her around like ducklings. Yet, she was elusive. She never lingered after the market closed, and no one had ever been invited to her home. Suitors, young men, merchants, and even travelers attempted to woo her, but she always declined their advances with a soft smile. "Thank you, but I am not ready," she would say. Her words were polite, but her tone was final. The mystery of Akila consumed the villagers. Some said she had come from a distant land. Others believed she had been abandoned as a child and raised by spirits in the forest. Rumors swirled, yet no one knew the truth. One fateful day, a merchant named Is arrived in Oko. A man of ambition and charisma, Is had traveled far and wide, trading fine cloth, jewelry, and spices. He prided himself on being able to read people, yet when he first saw Akila at the market, he was at a loss. Her beauty and poise left him spellbound. "Who is she?" he asked a nearby vendor. The vendor chuckled knowingly. "That's Akila, the flower of Oko. But don't waste your time. Many have tried to win her heart, and all have failed." Is, however, was not one to give up easily. He approached her store, his confident stride faltering slightly as he caught her serene gaze. "Good morning," he greeted her, flashing his most charming smile. "I'm Is, a merchant passing through. May I ask your name?" "Akila," she replied softly, her voice as smooth as a river's current. Is lingered at her store, buying more than he needed just to continue their conversation. They spoke about the market, the village, and the weather, but Akila shared little about herself. Is left the market that day intrigued, vowing to return. And return he did. Each morning, Is would find an excuse to visit Akila's store. He brought her small gifts, silken scarves, intricate beads, and exotic spices. At first, Akila was polite but distant, thanking him without accepting his overtures. Yet, over time, his persistence began to chip away at her guarded demeanor. She laughed at his jokes, and though she shared little about her past, she started to ask him about his travels and the world beyond Oko. The villagers took notice. Some were pleased to see Akila finally opening up to someone, while others muttered warnings to Is. "Be careful," an elder cautioned him. "She is not like the rest of us. There's something unusual about her." But Is dismissed their words. To him, Akila was not a mystery to fear but a puzzle to unravel. He was determined to learn the truth, and in doing so, he hoped to win her heart. One evening, as the market began to quiet and the setting sun bathed the village in hues of gold and crimson, Is made his move. "Akila," he said, his voice steady but his heart racing, "I feel drawn to you in a way I cannot explain. I wish to know you better, not just as a friend but as something more." Akila froze, her serene expression faltering for the first time. She looked away, her hands gripping the edge of her store. "Is, you don't know what you're asking," she murmured. "Then help me understand," he urged. "Whatever it is, we can face it together." For a long moment, Akila was silent. Finally, she met his gaze, her eyes filled with a sadness that made his heart ache. "If you truly wish to know me," she said, her voice trembling slightly, then you must be prepared for what you might discover. My life is not as simple as it seems. Is nodded, his resolve unwavering. I will not waver, no matter what you reveal. Akila's lips curved into a faint smile, though her eyes remained shadowed. Very well, Is. But promise me one thing, if you choose to step into my world, you must do so with an open heart and without fear. There is no turning back. Is placed his hand over his heart. I promise. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in twilight hues, Akila gathered her belongings and left the market. Is watched her go, his heart pounding with anticipation and trepidation. He had no idea what lay ahead, but he was certain of one thing: he would follow Akila wherever her path led. Little did he know, the path would take him to the very edges of reality, where secrets were woven into the fabric of the world, and love would be tested in ways he could never have imagined. A budding connection. The days turned into weeks, and Is continued his visits to Akila's store. Each morning, he brought her something: a vibrant flower, a trinket from his travels, or simply a story to share. Slowly, Akila's demeanor softened, and a tentative friendship began to blossom between them. Is was unlike anyone Akila had ever met. He was charming without being overbearing, persistent but never pushy. His stories of faraway lands filled her imagination, and she found herself looking forward to his visits. One day, as they sat by her stall after the market had quieted, Is asked, "You've heard so many of my stories, Akila, but you've shared so little about yourself. Why is that?" Akila hesitated, her hands busy folding a cloth that didn't need folding. "My story is complicated," she said softly. "It is not one I can tell easily." Is leaned forward, his gaze warm and honest. "I'm not asking to pry or judge. I just want to understand you better." Akila looked at him, her eyes searching his face as though trying to gauge the sincerity of his words. Finally, she sighed. "There are things about me that may be difficult to accept. Things that even I struggle to come to terms with." He smiled gently. "Akila, everyone carries burdens. Whatever yours may be, I'm here to listen." Her lips curved into a faint smile, but the shadows in her eyes did not fade. "Perhaps one day," she murmured. Despite her reluctance to share her secrets, their bond deepened. Is began to see glimpses of the woman behind the mystery. She was intelligent and thoughtful, with a quiet strength that belied her gentle demeanor. She had a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard, and her laughter was like music, rare but beautiful. One afternoon, as they walked by the river that ran through the village, Akila asked, "Why do you keep coming back, Is? Surely a man like you, who has seen so much of the world, has more exciting things to do than visit a small village like Oku." Is chuckled. "It's true, I've traveled far and wide. But nowhere else have I met someone like you." Akila raised an eyebrow, a teasing smile playing on her lips. "That sounds like something you've said to many women." Is grinned. "Perhaps. But this time, it's true." Akila laughed, shaking her head. "You are incorrigible." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light over the water, Is turned serious. "Akila, I don't know what it is about you, but I feel like I've been searching for you my entire life." Her smile faded, and she looked away, her expression unreadable. "Be careful, Is," she said quietly. "Sometimes, what we search for can lead us to places we never expected or wanted to go." Her words lingered in Is's mind long after they parted that evening. He sensed that Akila was trying to protect him, but from what he could not say. The village buzzed with gossip about their growing closeness. Some villagers were pleased, hoping that Is might be the one to finally win Akila's heart. Others were skeptical, wary of the merchant's intentions and Akila's mysterious nature. One of the elders, a man named Noji, approached Is in the market one morning. You seem like a good man, Noji said, his tone serious. But be careful. Akila is not like the rest of us. There are stories about her. Stories? Is asked, curious but not alarmed. Noji glanced around as if checking to make sure no one was listening. Some say she came from the forest beyond Oku, where spirits dwell. Others say she's cursed. I don't know what's true, but I do know this: Akila is not an ordinary woman. Is nodded thoughtfully. Thank you for the warning, Noji. But I believe there is more to Akila than what people say. I intend to find out for myself. The elder sighed but said no more. That evening, Is decided to confront Akila. As the market closed and the last of the villagers drifted away, he approached her stall. Akila, he said, his tone gentle but firm, I've heard the stories the villagers tell about you. They say you're not like the rest of us, that you come from the forest or that you're cursed. I don't know what to believe, but I want to hear the truth from you. Akila stiffened, her hands tightening around the basket she was holding. And if the stories are true, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Then I will accept you as you are, he said without hesitation. But I want to hear it from you, not from the whispers of others. For a long moment, Akila said nothing. Then she set down her basket and turned to face him fully. If I tell you the truth, you may regret it. Are you certain you want to know? Is nodded. I am. Akila took a deep breath. Very well, she said. Meet me at the edge of the forest tomorrow night, after the moon rises. I will tell you everything. Is agreed, his heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and unease. As Akila walked away, her silhouette fading into the twilight, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change forever. The Forbidden Union. The next evening, under the light of a full moon, he stood at the edge of the forest that bordered Oku. The air was cool, and a faint mist hung low among the trees, giving the place an ethereal quality. Despite the beauty, he felt a gnawing sense of unease. He clutched the small lantern he had brought, its flickering flame casting long shadows on the ground. Moments later, Akila emerged from the darkness of the trees. She moved with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly, her white garments shimmering in the moonlight. She approached Is with measured steps, her expression calm but serious. You came, she said softly. I gave you my word, Is replied, his voice steady despite the apprehension tightening his chest. I want to know the truth, Akila. No matter what it is. Akila studied him for a moment, as if searching for any trace of doubt. Finally, she nodded. Then follow me. She turned and walked into the forest. Is hesitated briefly, then followed her, the lantern's glow barely keeping the encroaching darkness at bay. The forest grew denser as they moved deeper into its heart, the air thick with the scent of moss and earth. Strange sounds, whispers, rustling leaves, distant animal cries, filled the air, making Isa's skin prickle. Eventually, they reached a small clearing where the moonlight broke through the canopy, illuminating a stone circle etched with intricate patterns. Akila stepped into the center of the circle and turned to face Is. This place, she began, gesturing to the circle, is a sacred ground for my family. It is where my story begins, and where I will reveal it to you. He set down his lantern and stepped closer, his gaze fixed on Akila. I'm listening. She took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly before her. I am not entirely human, she said, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. I come from a lineage of serpent spirits who dwell in the heart of this forest. My true form is that of a serpent, though I can take human form as you see me now. Isa's eyes widened, but he said nothing, allowing her to continue. My family has lived in secrecy for generations, protecting our realm and our way of life. But I was different, I longed for something more. I wanted to experience the human world, to live among people, to feel the things they feel. My family warned me against it, telling me that humans would never accept me if they knew the truth. But I couldn't stay hidden forever. She paused, her gaze falling to the ground. When I left the forest and came to Oko, my family placed a condition upon me. They said I could live as a human, but if I ever revealed my true nature, it would break the fragile bond that allows me to stay in this form. They also warned me that love, true, human love, was forbidden. If I fell in love with a human, it would unravel everything. He stared at her, his mind racing to process her words. So, the villagers were right. The stories about you being from the forest, they were true. Akila nodded. Partially. But the rumors only scratched the surface of the truth. He stepped closer, his expression a mix of wonder and concern. Why are you telling me this now? You could have kept your secret. Because I care for you, Akila said, her voice trembling. And I couldn't let you walk into this without knowing the truth. I need you to understand what you're stepping into. Silence hung between them, broken only by the faint rustling of leaves. Finally, he spoke. Akila, I don't know what to say. This is more than I ever imagined. But I meant what I said before. I care for you too, and I'm not going to turn away from you because of who or what you are. Akila's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, a flicker of hope crossed her face. Do you mean that is truly? Yes, he said firmly. I don't care about the warnings or the risks. I want to be with you, Akila. No matter what. She stepped forward, her hands trembling as they reached for his. You don't know what this will cost you, she whispered. If you choose to be with me, you will face challenges you cannot imagine. He squeezed her hands gently. Then we will face them together. The following days were filled with preparation for their union. Akila, though cautious, allowed herself to hope that perhaps this time, things could be different. For his part, threw himself into the arrangements with enthusiasm, determined to show both Akila and the villagers that their love was genuine. However, whispers of their union spread quickly, and not all were pleased. Some villagers viewed their relationship with suspicion, recalling the eerie rumors surrounding Akila. A few elders even approached urging him to reconsider. She's not one of us, one elder warned. Her word and ours cannot mix. If you marry her, you will bring misfortune upon yourself and the village. But Is refused to be swayed. I have made my choice, he told them. And I will stand by it. On the night before the wedding, Akila's mother appeared at the edge of the village. Her form was both human and serpent, shimmering in the moonlight. Akila met her in secret, her heart pounding. Mother, she said, her voice strained. Why are you here? To warn you, her mother replied, her tone sharp. You are making a grave mistake. This union will bring nothing but pain. The curse that binds our family will not spare you. Akila lifted her chin, her resolve firm. I have made my choice, mother. I love him. Her mother's expression softened, though her eyes remained sorrowful. Then may the gods protect you, my daughter. But remember, love alone cannot shield you from the consequences of your choices. As her mother faded back into the shadows, Akila felt a pang of doubt. But when she thought of his, her resolve returned. Together, they would face whatever came their way. The day of the wedding arrived, and the village of Oko was alive with celebration. Yet beneath the joyous facade, an undercurrent of unease lingered. As the sun set and Akila and Is exchanged their vows, the villagers watched with bated breath, sensing that this was no ordinary union. As the couple retired to their home that evening, unaware of what lay ahead, the winds whispered through the trees, carrying with them a warning that only the forest spirits could hear. The wedding night revelation. The village of Oku glowed under the light of a full moon as the celebrations of Akila and Isa's wedding slowly came to an end. Villagers returned to their homes, leaving the newlyweds to begin their life together. Their modest home, nestled on the edge of the village, was adorned with flowers and tokens of goodwill from well-wishers. Inside, Akila and Is sat together in the soft glow of an oil lamp. The room was quiet, save for the occasional crackle of the fire. Akila seemed tense, her gaze distant as she toyed with the edge of her wedding cloth. "Are you all right?" Is asked, his voice gentle. Akila offered a faint smile. "I am. It's just, this moment feels surreal. A part of me didn't think it would ever come." Is reached for her hand. "It's real, Akila. We're here, together, and that's all that matters." She nodded but said nothing, her eyes flickering toward the window where the moonlight streamed in. As the night deepened, a strange unease settled over Akila. Her skin tingled, and a faint chill ran through her body. She glanced at Is, who was preparing to put out the lamp. "Is," she said suddenly, her voice edged with urgency. "Promise me something." He turned to her, surprised by the intensity in her tone. "Anything. Promise me that no matter what happens tonight, you won't be afraid. Promise me you won't leave." Is frowned, his heart beginning to race. "Akila, what's going on? You're scaring me." "Please," she whispered, her eyes pleading. "Just promise." "I promise," he said, though his unease was growing. Akila closed her eyes, as if bracing herself for something inevitable. A moment later, a sharp pain shot through her body, and she cried out, doubling over. "Akila!" Is rushed to her side, his hands hovering helplessly as she sank to the floor. Her breathing grew labored, and her skin began to glisten with an unnatural sheen. She clutched at the fabric of her dress, her fingers trembling. "It's happening," she gasped. I can't stop it." "What's happening?" Is demanded, panic rising in his voice. Before his eyes, Akila's form began to shift. Her legs fused together, and her skin darkened, taking on a scaly texture. Her hands morphed into long, sinuous coils, and her face elongated slightly, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Within moments, she had transformed completely into a massive, shimmering python. He stumbled backward, his breath caught in his throat. His lantern fell to the floor, casting eerie, flickering shadows on the walls. "Akila," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The serpent's head turned toward him, and her glowing eyes locked onto his. Though her form was terrifying, her gaze was filled with sorrow and vulnerability. "Is," she said, her voice echoing faintly in his mind, as though carried on the wind. "This is my truth. This is who I am." Isa's heart pounded as fear gripped him. He remembered his promise, but standing before the massive serpent, he felt paralyzed. I don't understand," he stammered. "I warned you," Akila said, her voice heavy with sadness. "I told you that love alone might not be enough. This is the curse I carry, the form I was born into. My family warned me this day would come, but I dared to hope it wouldn't." The weight of her words sank into his like stones. He had promised to accept her, but the sight of her in this form was overwhelming. The fear he thought he could overcome now consumed him. I need air," he said, backing toward the door. "Is, no." Akila cried, her voice filled with desperation. "You promised you wouldn't leave." But Is couldn't stay. The terror was too great. He turned and fled into the night, his footsteps pounding against the ground as he ran toward the village. The villagers were already stirring, awakened by the sound of Isa's cries. He burst into the square, pale and trembling, shouting incoherently. "She's a monster," he cried. "A serpent. A demon." The villagers gathered quickly, murmuring in confusion and fear. "What are you saying?" one of the elders demanded. He struggled to catch his breath. "Aquila, she's not human. She's a snake, a giant python." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some villagers exchanged fearful glances, while others shook their heads in disbelief. At that moment, a low hiss echoed through the air, and the villagers turned toward the source. Emerging from the shadows was the massive serpent, her scales gleaming in the moonlight. The crowd recoiled, screams breaking out as people scrambled to distance themselves. Aquila slithered into the square, her movements slow and deliberate. "I am Aquila," she said, her voice resonating in their minds. "The woman you have known and trusted. This is my true form, the truth I have hidden from you all." The villagers fell silent, their fear giving way to uncertainty. They had admired Aquila for years, but now, faced with the reality of her true nature, they didn't know what to think. One elder stepped forward cautiously. "Why have you revealed yourself now?" "Because I no longer have a choice," Aquila replied. "The curse that binds me has stripped away my human form. I did not wish for this, but I cannot change what I am." The villagers murmured among themselves, unsure of how to respond. Suddenly, the oracle, an elderly woman revered for her wisdom and connection to the spirits, stepped forward. She raised her hand, silencing the crowd. "Enough," she said, her voice firm. "This matter requires careful judgment. Aquila, you will tell us everything, your origins, your curse, and the events that have brought us to this night. Only then will we decide your fate." Aquila nodded, her gaze solemn. "I will tell you everything." As the villagers gathered in the square, their faces a mixture of fear, curiosity, and sorrow, Aquila began to recount her story. The weight of her past and the consequences of her choices now rested on the judgment of the oracle and the people of Oku. The oracle's verdict. The villagers of Oku gathered tightly in the square, the flickering light of their torches casting long shadows on the ground. The air was heavy with tension as Aquila, still in her serpent form, coiled in the center of the gathering. Her shimmering scales caught the firelight, and though her appearance was fearsome, her eyes held only sorrow. The oracle, a stooped figure draped in layers of white cloth, stepped forward. Her staff, adorned with charms and feathers, clinked softly as she moved. The villagers fell silent as she raised a hand. "Aquila," the oracle began, her voice strong despite her age, "you stand before the people of Oku not as the woman they knew, but as the truth of your being. You have hidden your nature, and now you must explain. Tell us your story, child." Aquila dipped her head respectfully. "I will," she said, her voice resonating faintly in the minds of those present. "I owe you all the truth." She began her tale, recounting her lineage as a serpent spirit, bound by ancient laws and a family curse. She spoke of her decision to leave the forest, drawn by the allure of human life and her longing for love. "My family warned me," she admitted, her tone heavy with regret. "They told me that humans would never accept me, that I was risking everything by stepping into your world. But I couldn't live in isolation any longer. I wanted to belong, to experience what it means to be human." The villagers listened, some with fear in their eyes, others with sympathy. "I tried to live among you as one of you," Aquila continued. "But my family's curse followed me. It was meant to prevent me from finding love, to ensure I would always remain bound to the forest. When I chose to love Is, the curse unraveled my disguise." She turned her gaze to Is, who stood among the villagers, his face pale and stricken. "I told you the risks," she said softly. "But I did not want to lose you. I dared to hope that love could overcome even the strongest curse." Is shifted uncomfortably under her gaze but said nothing. When Aquila finished, the oracle stepped forward, leaning on her staff. "A heavy tale," she said, her eyes narrowing as she studied Aquila. "And what of you, Is? You knew of her otherworldly nature and chose to proceed. Why did you flee?" He swallowed hard, his voice trembling as he spoke. I thought I was ready. I thought I could accept her no matter what. But when I saw her transform, I was afraid. I couldn't control it. The oracle regarded him for a long moment. Fear is natural, but it does not absolve you of your promise. You vowed to stay, and yet you broke that vow. Tell me, was your love for Aquila true, or was it born of something else? Is hesitated, glancing nervously at the crowd. I loved her, he said finally. But I cannot deny that part of me was drawn to her mystery. I thought she was someone who could elevate my life, someone extraordinary. Perhaps I wanted her for the wrong reasons at first, but I came to care for her deeply. The villagers murmured among themselves, their reactions mixed. Some sympathized with Isa's honesty, while others frowned at his confession. The oracle raised her hand, silencing the crowd. Both of you are at fault, she declared. Aquila, you entered the human world knowing the risks, yet you kept your truth hidden until it was too late. You pursued a bond without fully understanding what it required of you, and when faced with the truth, you ran. The oracle paused, her gaze sweeping over the villagers. But love, even flawed love, has brought us to this moment. Now, we must decide what is to be done. She tapped her staff on the ground, and a deep silence fell over the square. The oracle closed her eyes, murmuring an incantation under her breath. The air grew heavy, and the faint sound of whispers seemed to rise from the ground itself. When she opened her eyes, they glowed faintly with an otherworldly light. The spirits have spoken, she said. This union cannot be undone, for it has set forces in motion that cannot be reversed. And Aquila, your fates are now intertwined. You must face the consequences of your choices together. The crowd gasped, but the oracle raised her hand for silence. Aquila, she continued, you have suffered under the weight of your family's curse. To break it, you must return to the forest and confront your kin. Only they can lift this burden, but it will come at a price. She turned to And you, must accompany her. If your love is true, you will stand by her side and face whatever trials await. If you falter again, the curse will grow stronger, binding you both to misery.